Hi, everyone. It's Ian Heller with Distribution Strategy Group, and welcome to today's tech panel discussion on how distributors are driving productivity with process automation. We have a really great panel today, so I'm looking forward to getting to that. But let's do a little bit of business before we get that done. Want to talk about an offering from Distribution Strategy Group called Distributor RX. It's our own software suite. And we've got Customer Experience RX, which is a net promoter score software designed just for distributors. It's like an MRI on your business from your customer's perspective. It's really detailed. You can segment it by location, by region, by branch, by customer type, by job function. And people love it. It's a subscription service, and we're getting rave reviews and a whole bunch more customers. And we are now activating benchmarking so you can see how you compare to other distributors in terms of your net promoter score performance. We also have Employee Experience RX. So this is an MRI on your business from your employees' point of view. So this is an employee engagement score. It's very similar to the Net Promoter Score, only it's your customers, your employees' opinion. What we've seen over the years is if your employees are happy, your customers are happy because your employees are taking care of them. So this is terrific software. Two different ways of looking at your business. A lot of companies do this, but this tool is designed specifically for distributors. It's very low cost. It's very cost effective. And you can do it as many times a year as you'd like. Then we have Demand RX. Demand RX actually estimates end market demand or customer demand by location for customers and prospects by your product line. So we use your data, add some outside data, and there's an algorithm that my genius business partner and our wonderful statistician Macy Dodd have come up with that does a great job estimating potential by location. In my opinion, it's the best product out there on the market. So check in with us at distributionstrategy.com if y'all want more information on those products. But let's bring in the stars of the show today. So here's our illustrious panel. We've got Chase Eldridge, who's the Vice President of Sales with Powerfleet, Jason Sullivan, who's the CEO and founder of Distro, and Varun Sridharan, who's Director of Science Development at Infor. Gentlemen, welcome to the panel. We're delighted to have you all here for what should be a really interesting discussion about process automation in distribution. So let's start with some introductions. Jason, why don't you go first? Tell us about you, your background, and what Distro does for distributors, please.
Thanks, Ian. And it's great to be here again. It's always a pleasure to work with the folks at DSG. A little bit about myself. I'm the founder and CEO of a company called Distro. And Distro is the AI sales platform for distributors. We help distributor sales teams sell more effectively by driving faster quotes, more accurate quotes with better product information, and more gross margin per quote. And the Distro platform includes automation for sales order entry, bill of materials quoting, takeoffs, and accounts payable. And importantly, our all-in-one AI sales agent, RepBot, which helps you quote, cross-reference, configure systems, do technical and customer support, and more.
So really, I mean, process automation is what you guys do, right?
Day in, day out, it's really what we're focused on. So helping folks in the distribution world really kind of get more leverage out of their sales organizations and 10x their productivity.
10x their productivity. Wow. And you guys got a lot of customers now, right, Jason? I mean, you guys have been around for a little while.
We do. We're kind of everywhere, and we operate across multiple distribution verticals. And we're really excited to be talking about automation in and around distribution today.
Fantastic. Okay, thank you. And Varun, we'll have you go next. Varun, I know you were at Infor for a long time, then at Amazon, and now you're back at Infor. This is at least your second program with us. So welcome back. And why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, and what Infor does in terms of process automation?
Yeah, sure. Thanks for having me, Ian. What I do here at Infor is we build machine learning models that can actually serve many industries, not just a distribution. So we have a catalog of around 50 plus active use cases that is widely being used by multiple customers. What is so cool about what we do is I'm going to give you this analogy of what happened to SpaceX. When SpaceX was on the brink of the collapse, they had to come up with an innovation to keep up with their cost. And what happened as part of that process is they invented what is called as reusable rockets, right?
Yeah.
It's not like say one and done. So in Infor, what I do is that is the exact philosophy that we follow, which means that we build these machine learning models that can be built once, but it can be reused as many times as possible
Mm.
across as many industries as possible. And what happens as part of this is we pass on this cost savings to our customers, if you will, right? Whenever they sign up for our subscription services. So that's what we do here. And my team is comprises of almost like say 70 plus people who build these machine learning models day in and day out. So I'm going to try to keep today's session more light, but not sounding very geeky or professorial, because I have a machine learning background. So I have been in this space for more than a decade.
Yeah.
So even before the chat GPT days, so I am really excited to see how much traction AI is actually getting today. Because back in the days when I used to talk to my friends, people used to think that I'm actually a professor or probably like say someone who works in a university, but not doing any real-time job. So that's a short introduction about me. Yes.
Good, good. Well, thank you very much. Good. Glad you're here. Chase Eldridge, I know you're at an airport, but thank you for joining us anyway. Why don't you tell us a little bit about your background and what Powerfleet does for distributors, particularly in terms of process automation?
Yeah, hey Ian, thanks for having me. Hard and Varun, hard to follow that. You know, being accused of not doing work. That's pretty great. But hey, good morning, good afternoon to everybody. Chase Eldridge from Powerfleet. We make it easier for companies to understand what's going on across their assets, light duty vehicles, forklifts, any type of IoT operation inside their operations. You name it. So we pull that data into one place. We're using AI to enhance and spot issues and helping teams work safer and more efficiently. We've been recognized recently as one of the top 7 most innovative IoT companies in the world. So something we're really proud of. And 3 decades of working with Fortune 1000 clients in the distribution, food and beverage, transportation industries. So happy to be here. Look forward to the conversation.
Fantastic. Okay, I just stopped sharing, so you guys are just seeing us now, right?
Yeah.
All right, good, good. Okay, so hey guys, this is a fascinating topic, and I think there's more opportunity for process automation than ever. And I used to say, I think this is still true. Distribution is similar in retail in some ways because you buy from a lot of different suppliers, you sell to many more customers, you hold inventory in the middle. But distribution is infinitely more complex for a number of reasons. And it felt to me like a lot of the automation solutions that retailers could implement weren't really applicable in the B2B world because the B2B world was more complicated. But I think AI actually can solve a lot of the problems and headaches and meet the opportunities for automation in B2B that previous technologies could not. So as kind of an open question, I'll throw it out there for anyone to answer. Are there key triggers in a distribution business that signal the need or the opportunity for process automation? I mean, what do you look for and go, aha, that's a process that could be automated? Anybody want to jump on that?
I'll jump in. I'll say it's a very long list, which is why it's such a compelling space to be building in.
Yeah.
But I think there are quite a few tailwinds here that really spurred us here at Distro to get moving. And I'd say one is the major generational shift happening right now that's been happening and is really sort of accelerating. So what we're talking about here is folks on the way in and on the way out. Those people on the way out are people who are more advanced in their career, are sort of carrying with them a high degree of tribal knowledge. And that's kind of disappearing into the ether, right? So there needs to be a way to digitize that. There needs to be a way to automate that, democratize that to the newer entrants. On the other hand, you've got folks who are just in the beginning of their career, and there's a challenge in attracting people to the industry. And I think some really smart folks are working on that problem. But when you bring them in, they have a certain way of working and a certain set of expectations for how their day should go and what technology they should have access to. And that really kind of changes the equation. And then the other sort of aspect of generational shift I'll note is in leadership. You've got some great programs like Hardy's Emerging Leaders Program on the HVAC side that really kind of fosters this and caters to it. Especially in multi-generational family businesses, you've got folks who are just now stepping into that vice president or president position, and they have the opportunity to be an agent for change. And so I'm spending a lot of my time talking to these folks. I'm sure the other folks on this panel are doing the same thing, helping them kind of shepherd their organization into this AI era. So there are a few different angles to this generational shift, all of which I think are a big signal to be building and to be collaborating.
That's
Yeah,
great. Go ahead.
let me just piggyback on what Jason just mentioned, right? With this generational shift, the other thing that I'm also seeing is people are trying to be more truth seekers, right? I think the bias that used to exist is kind of going away because they wanted to keep their customers happy, right? They wanted in that process they would want to make revenue and they want to keep their employees and people happy as well. So the question that they are asking themselves is, tell me what is it that I'm not doing correctly, right? I think that's a very courageous ask coming from some of these customers. And I can also see that like the people are not worried about technology anymore because they are already seeing that the landscape of shift that's currently happening is so tremendous that the possibilities are endless. So the question that they keep asking is like, say, what is it that I'm not doing correct, as I told before, and they wanted to make data-driven decisions, right? They are not just going. They don't want to sit and like say just rely on something that has been happening maybe for the past 20 or 30 years because that has been the status quo. So they are basically challenging the status quo, is what I would say.
Okay, so we've got there's generational shift. So you've got people who are basically, I think, more open and maybe more in need of process automation. To paraphrase Jason, you've got people who are looking for they're truth seeking. They want to know what they can really do with process automation. But Chase, what do you look for in a process itself that you think identifies that it may lend itself to automation?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I love the dialogue and answers in the first one. Good job, guys. Yeah, look, I think there are a handful of things. I think a couple of things to start. Data capture and event reconstruction or investigation is always something that's really ripe for automation. So visibility and responsiveness, minimizing downtime. So it could be in terms of a safety checklist inside of a DC. Utilization analysis and workload rebalancing, maintenance planning. Those three things all ladder into a ripe area for data capture. Furthermore, topics like safety and compliance enforcement with distracted driving and fatigue enhancement. Something that we're seeing currently is really the advent of pedestrian proximity cameras inside warehouses. It's we've seen over the road dash cameras in vehicles really be mainstream now, but it's really starting to come to life inside distribution centers as well.
Got it. Okay. And so, and by the way, the audience can jump in with questions anytime. There's a Q&A button. We welcome your questions, and that will help guide the discussion. Jason, with your experience at Distro, what were some of the earliest pain points you saw that resulted in you building out certain capabilities?
Yeah, it's a great question. So maybe following on from my earlier answer, in those conversations that I and we at Distro had early on in our sort of R&D journey years ago, with folks at the executive level, with folks at the branch manager down to the counter staff level, I spent a ton of time in very early days driving, flying, meeting folks, interviewing them, shadowing them, just to better understand where the challenges are. And again, that's at the branch level, at the executive level, at the home office or the HQ level. And what became clear is a few different things. I'd say number one, just a tremendous amount of time spent on non-selling activity. And this goes for every archetype within the sales org. And we're focused on each of those different archetypes. So anybody from counter staff to CSR, inside sales, commercial quoting or takeoff teams, and outside sales. Each of these different roles has their own challenges, of course. But at the end of the day, what I noticed and what we've built for is how do we get that person in whatever archetype of the sales org they're in? How do we get that person spending the most possible time with customers, developing the relationship, being consultative, and getting away from the manual work, getting away from the searching and climbing up the learning curve more quickly so that they can be perceived as being as consultative as possible. And so that opens up a huge world of possibilities as far as what to build and what to focus on. And really where we started out was, I'd say, sales order entry and RFQ, sort of bill of materials based quoting automation. That is, you've got you're barraged all the time with these requests for quotes in whatever format they might be, snapshot of a handwritten note all the way to a PDF or an Excel file. You don't want to have your people keying those into the ERP all day, every day. It invites fatigue. It invites, challenges around data quality, just about everything. So automating around that, adding some intelligence, some AI-based intelligence to that process to be able to automate that end to end was a really key early insight for us. And that sort of expanded. There are different forms of quoting, takeoff level or commercial level quoting. We see a lot of in various spaces that we operate in, right? And that's a totally different motion and is a tremendous drag on the time and energy of the people on those teams. I mean, it can take hours or even days to quote a full commercial takeoff. You might not even win that bid, right? And that sort of extends to other roles within the sales org, counter staff. It's a different challenge around being more sort of real-time consultative. So it's a bit of an expansive answer on the original question, but what we saw is just take these people who are excellent at what they do and give them the opportunity to have the leverage in their day to spend more time with the customer and less time keying things in.
Got it. Okay. And so Chase, pivoting over to you, in terms of, fleet mobile assets, I'm just going to ask you to expand on your earlier answer a little bit in terms of what are the processes that you are automating, and then what are the gains that people are seeing? Can you give me some examples of, you don't have to name names, but give me some examples of the kinds of gains that people are seeing by automating processes in your arena?
Yeah, sure. So I'll give two examples. One is a very typical problem that we solve, which is manual checklists for forklift operators. So we have solutions that automate that, as well as automate badging in, badging out for different users. So that's a quick win and part of our sort of core offers. Something secondly that we're starting to do a lot more of is what we call unifying operations, which is stitching together complex workflows, taking manual work or inefficiencies out of customer processes. So bridging together multiple systems. It might be an HR system, it might be a training system, or a WMS system, et cetera. So the second part there is really where our company is starting to see a ton of traction, and resulting in some, call it, recent Fortune 100 type of clients really investing heavily with us on expanding their partnership.
Got it. Okay. And Varun, boy, ERPs are so broad. And I take it you're the one at Infor who's responsible for process automation across the many different ways that that customers use an ERP. Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
So how do you prioritize those when you have so many different choices about where to invest your technology resources? Because an ERP is, everything from order entry down, to managing returns, to managing your warehouse, to managing transactions. I mean, how do you decide how to prioritize automation opportunities in an ERP?
Yeah, I think that's a good question, and I don't think there is a one size fits all model to answer that question, right?
Okay.
So, but one of the things that we really look forward are what are the low hanging fruits, right? What I mean by low hanging fruits is what is the smallest amount of work that we can actually do and make the biggest impact, right? So we kind of follow that philosophy. And and some of the things that I have been seeing that customers have been feeling that as a pain point is, I call this is the theme that I'm kind of seeing, which is managed by exceptions, right? This kind of lines up with what both Jason and Chase just mentioned. They don't want to do the mundane activities, right? They wanted to make sure that we can flag some of those exceptions, and then they can use their higher cognitive power to do it. As an example, for example, when you're in a warehouse, I think it is a no-brainer that everyone knows that you cannot have a baby product sitting next to an hazardous material, right? So if we can actually automate that, right, that would be great. But flag me the exceptions, right? There are nuances, and I would be more than happy to engage, because when you do that, what happens is you're freeing up their time from not doing these mundane activities, and they're really excited to go talk with the customers, understand the pain points, and build that strategic relationship, right? I think
Yeah.
that's the philosophy that we use when we are trying to prioritize resources and the from our side. So yeah.
Got it. Okay. And so let's talk about data, because I'd assume it's always been garbage in, garbage out. I think that's as true as ever, probably. But when you're evaluating a distributor in terms of their ability to automate processes with your solutions, what are you looking for in terms of the quality and comprehensiveness of their data, whether that's across, customers, products, any operating data, et cetera? Chase, let's start with you. When you're evaluating a customer for your solution, what data are you either recommending that they get or verifying that they have before you proceed?
Yeah.
So,
So, oh,
no, I'm
sorry.
sorry.
Did you say Jason or Chase?
I meant Chase, but go ahead. But let's
Go,
start.
go, ahead, go ahead, Jason. He had a
I,
great answer ready. Go ahead.
I may have said Chasen just to confuse you both.
All good. Go
I
ahead,
like
Jason.
it. He mixes it up.
Yeah.
I'll give it a shot here. I'll pass it to
Okay.
Chase afterwards.
Great. All right.
So yeah, we do quite a bit of integration, obviously, with distributor data systems, and I'd say the cornerstone of that is going to be the ERP system,
Yeah.
as you might expect. But plenty of distributors have separate e-commerce PIMs or product data warehouses, for instance. They might have totally separate sort of knowledge bases that we want to connect to for the purposes of powering our RepBot chat agent that I mentioned before. We at Distro maintain and kind of continuously grow our own internal PIM on an industry by industry basis. And then we've got some third party data vendors that we work with as well. So when we say, what do we expect of the distributor? Our goal is really to expect as little as possible in terms of data cleanliness or data availability. We want to meet people where they are. And we recognize that, if we're looking at the larger of our customers that are multi-billion-dollar distributors, all the way down to individual, kind of single or double location distributors, there's going to be a wide variety of data preparedness. And, we want to make sure that we can serve everybody across that spectrum. So while that multi-billion-dollar distributor may well have a massive PIM and a very well, kind of sort of connected ERP with exposed APIs and just about everything you dream of, right? And an excellent IT team. You might have at the smaller distributor, you might not even have an IT manager in-house. They might be fractional. There might be a third party. They might not have, had the budget for a PIM. They might not even be paying for APIs if it's an older ERP. So to that, I would say we bring a lot in terms of data quality to the table, in terms of data volume to the table. And we work with distributors kind of regardless of what their setup is. I think at the end of the day, the IT challenge is more of a human challenge that we seek to meet, which is it's not a super big, difficult challenge to connect to an ERP, but there are moving parts in terms of who manages it and who gives the API keys and who can, do the testing and things like that. I think it comes down to ownership and kind of process management. We have a champion on our end at Distro. We have a champion on the distributor's end from sort of an implementation and IT perspective, and we work together to make sure that things get connected.
Yeah, that reminds me. I think almost every time that I work with a distributor, there's almost this point of confessional where they kind of lower their heads and say, "Unfortunately, I have to admit our data is terrible." And I hear it again and again and again. So I think even distributors, and I look at their data, I'm like, actually, your guys are in pretty good shape. People think that their data is worse than their competitors, when in fact, it's a bell curve, and most people are in the heart of the bell curve, in my experience. But anyway, Chase, so what are you looking for in terms of data readiness and quality and comprehensiveness as you're evaluating a customer's fit for your solutions?
Yeah, I think our typical solution is anchored in some type of moving asset. So in a warehouse environment, that's probably a forklift of some sort. And so that typically starts the conversation with us as a partnership. It's really peeling back, what pains is the business seeing in terms of visibility, in terms of risk mitigation. Kind of downstream, as I mentioned earlier, on the kind of unified operations side. There's a ton of inefficiency inside really every company. We're in a situation with we're all bloated with different platforms, different different data sources. Something that we're really excited about to bring to bear, and kind of points to the recognition I mentioned earlier, is the ability to ingest disparate data, cleanse it, and push it back out inside our platform or a customer's platform, depends. We do both. In a really consistent, sanitized, straightforward way, and not just in a dashboard, but layered with AI insights on top that really helps customers make better decisions. And I think the abundance of data is not going to lessen. It's going to continue to get more and more. I think AI tools and automation can be unlocks for heightened efficiency. I think for us, we try to center everything on what is really the use case that we're solving for, and what is the cost of making a decision or not making a decision in terms of time, efficiency, safety, risk mitigation, et cetera.
Got it. Okay. And Varun, make the case for me for why a modern ERP is necessary in order to do widespread process automation at a distribution company.
So I think the answer to that question is, I'm just going to pick something that Chase actually mentioned, right? Which is working backwards from what is the pain point that the customer is typically kind of facing, right? I think that is going to be very important. The reason why I'm saying this is, I think there is also a lack of understanding when it also comes to data and like how that needs to be used to drive some of the outcomes. What I mean by that is, I categorize the outcomes as two types, right? One is there are deterministic outcomes and there are non-deterministic outcomes, right? Which means that, say, for example, if you would want to build something called as like a pick sequencing use case, right? Or if you would want to develop something for a dynamic slotting use case, no matter how many times you run it, you're going to get the same answer. So in that case, I don't think a volume of data or variety of data is important. I think getting minimal amount of data to make sure that you can actually build an optimization model, which I call it as a stateless system, because there is no learning there. It is just like the kind of optimizing the system, if you will, right? Further, I don't think you need kind of a volume of data. But on the other hand, if you're trying to basically increase your basket size, if you will, where you're recommending additional products, they're trying to understand and learn from past patterns or order patterns is kind of going to be important, right? So I think knowing these two differences and then using that to basically drive your data discussion with your customers is going to be very important, is how at least I see of it, right? Because there have been cases where customers say, hey, I don't have enough data for me to drive an optimization use case. Guess what? Yes, I can build an optimization model for you and I can give it to you. And as and when these edge cases evolves, you can kind of keep configuring it and then you can kind of keep marching forward, right? But on the other hand, I cannot do the same when it comes to a product recommendation use case, right? So that's how at least I see of it. I mean, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, it does. It's funny because I think in my impression is that a growing number of companies are deciding that if they've been deferring putting in an ERP for the first time if they're small, or updating an ERP, for a while, it feels to me like there's momentum gaining in the marketplace. And I don't have any data to support that, but it feels like people realize that they have to have this strong backbone across their enterprise for these other applications to integrate to, and for them to have the right data in their, ready to power these other applications that provide them product productivity opportunities. Sorry. Okay, so let's talk about how you measure the success of these initiatives, because there's an awful lot of talk about AI. There's a huge amount of investment in AI. We've never seen anything like it. It's incredible how much investment is going into AI. But how do you measure the return on these investments? So, let's start with you this time, Jason. When you're trying to evaluate, when a customer's trying to evaluate investing in distro, what are the factors that they put into the ROI calculation, and what kinds of ROIs are you seeing? And then I know we had another question for you. We'll come back to that in a minute.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I can probably answer two in one here.
All right, go ahead.
So when we think about the ROI for the distro platform, and frankly, the ROI for the distro team to build a piece of functionality, we think about the gain that we can sort of the impact we can have on the bottom line for the distributor. And there are a few different ways that we think about that, some of which are easily measurable and some of which are a little bit more second order, but an important part of the conversation. So I would say if you look at time savings, that's one of the more easily measurable metrics that we pretty closely track here. So that is pre-distro, when your sales team, whichever person on that team, is turning a bill of materials RFQ into a quote, or quoting a commercial refrigeration system, or doing a commercial plumbing takeoff, for instance. The challenges are different, but the idea is kind of the same. How can you get more throughput from your team? So that's really the initial metric, is time saving. So how much time did it take for your people to turn a 50-line RFQ into a quote and enter it into the system, pre and post distro? And obviously there's quite a bit of nuance depending on the distributor, depending on the industry, depending on the size of the RFQ, but we routinely see improvements of anywhere between 70 and 90% in terms of the amount of time that it takes to go from zero to quote. Now that number goes sort of scales infinitely when you look at the commercial takeoff situation, because there's so much variability there. As far as bill of material to RFQ quoting, that can be anywhere between 60 seconds and 4 or 5 minutes for distro. For commercial plumbing takeoffs, for instance, that can be like a 5 to 10 minute process, and that's fairly constant. But if you look at what the manual process looks like, commercial takeoffs, that can be hours, that can be days, depending on the complexity of it, pre-automation, pre-distro. So I'd say, again, that time savings is kind of a primary ROI measurement, but it's also a matter of throughput. The related topic is how many quotes per day can somebody get through, or how many takeoffs per week can somebody get through. The second order, sort of harder to measure but important to discuss metric, is conversion rate. So the reality is, especially really for all the above, but particularly for commodity products quoting, you're going to be in a situation where, for better or for worse, you are competing on time to quote more than anything else. If you're competing on price, that's a different story. But oftentimes, the sooner you can get the quote out, the higher your conversion rate is going to be. So naturally, if you can reduce that time, you're going to see higher conversion rates, and that sort of plays out over time. And then the last thing I'll say is probably the hardest to measure. Maybe not that hard to measure with some of the offerings that DSG has, is customer satisfaction, right? So that's like kind of a third order thing, and that plays out over months, years. How consultative can your people be? How quickly can they respond to the customer? That's all going to be impacted by how quickly your people can quote, and that's going to help with customer retention, customer stickiness, customer sentiment over time. Which, as I understand, DSG has a platform that can help measure.
Yeah, no, we do. Hey, Chase, when you look across the PowerFleet set of applications, right? So it's safety and security, it's fuel management, it's maintenance and performance, it's managing regulatory compliance, resource management, visibility, sustainability. I mean, it's a pretty broad. Did I get them all? That's a pretty broad set of applications, right?
Yeah, sure. Yep.
Okay. So when when a customer is talking about engaging with you to manage those, fleet-based assets, do you present like an integrated solution of all of those? Do you typically approach them with one? Does it depend on the customer? I mean, how do you gauge where to get started with a customer in terms of, bring them new levels of productivity in their assets?
Yeah, it's a great question. And PowerFleet is about a $400 million company, third largest telematics company in the world, and really has the focus of this conversation so far has been on what I would call in-warehouse solutions, distribution type solutions, where we're 3 decades in, market leader, can serve forklifts of any manufacturer type. We also have a very robust outside of the warehouse or on-road telematics suite of solutions. Typically, we would have a customer start with one dimension, and we would expand. So our typical customer is a large or enterprise level customer. We would love to take their whole business all at once, but contracts and physical installations and such kind of precludes that. So we typically start with, a section and expand over time as we are able to showcase value in, one vertical or another. What's unique about us is we really can serve assets from end to end in supply chain, all the way from the farm to the manufacturing site to the delivery vehicles, all the way to the consumer or the retailer on the other side. So really end to end visibility and, enriched with unifying operations and systems and taking out inefficiency.
Got it. Okay. And Varun, when you're implementing an ERP, and many of us have been through this before, I mean, a lot of times you're doing it out of necessity. It's like we're just falling behind. We need to upgrade across the board. We want to, we've maxed out our old ERP. But the implementation is hard, right? And what are the factors that drive successful implementation of an ERP? And I think, for Jason and Chase, maybe if you want to comment on that from your perspective as well, are there cultural factors? Are there technical factors? Are there expertise and change management factors? What makes a successful implementation of an ERP happen?
I think in my experience, the longest pole in the tent is the last mile activity, right? Which means it's not the technology. They also probably have a process in place. I think getting the right stakeholders from the get-go and making sure that we are able to put ourselves in their shoes and walk through that journey is going to be very important, right? One of the hardest lessons that I learned is the decision when you're working very closely with the decision makers, but not with the persons who are actually on the field doing the job,
Mm.
then the change management becomes very hard, right? So this is something that we try to avoid from the get-go is what I would say, right? Getting the stakeholders on board, right? The other thing is also being very transparent about what it can do and what it cannot do, and how we would actually need the change management to kind of evolve, right? One of the things that I recently learned that I would also like to share as part of this change management process is how do you basically get your people on board, right? Instead of basically saying that what the technology can actually do, right? What it can do to you, I think that is the most important story that we will have to talk to and make sure that we can get on board with some of these people, right? I think both Jason and Chase touched on that. It is not about telling that, like, say, hey, the technology can do X, Y, and Z for you. It can automate. It can automate so that it can help you to do some better activities, right? I think putting that in a different perspective will also go a long way, is what I've seen about it. So, yeah.
Got it. Chase, Jason, you guys want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I'll say great answer, Varun, and I'll extend. If you look at the sort of psychological side of things, there's a very real concern out there across industries. AI at a minimum is going to meaningfully change my day to day, and in the worst case, is it going to come and eliminate part or all of my job? It's a scary thing for a lot of folks, and I do think that there are companies out there that do have the goal of fully automating people out. That's not what we're about here at Distro. We see a universe where it's really more human centered, as I noted before, and it's really more of an enablement type of thing for people to be much more actualized, much more fulfilled, much more effective at their position. So it's one thing, when we're doing an implementation at Distro, it's one thing to get alignment with folks at the executive level or at the VP of sales or the head of inside sales level, because they understand what the benefit's going to be. But they're not contending necessarily with the same level of fear or uncertainty as folks who are intended to be the end user, that is the counter salesperson or the inside salesperson or any of the other archetypes that I mentioned before. So I think it's about communication. I think it's about aligning psychologically, and it's about kind of managing the messaging in the change management. We call it change leadership. So leading the change from our standpoint at Distro, every touch point, every conversation that we have, we want to make sure that we get in front of those people, those end users. We don't want to just have our interactions stop at the executive or the team lead level. And then also say, just making sure that the folks that we're working with at the executive level are doing the internal messaging, and we sort of help them shape that. Hey, talk to your people, help them understand that this is here not to disrupt their day or to add just another tool to the tool belt or to somehow replace them. These are the specific ways in which it's going to help them, right? There's a real incentive here. Look, if you're a salesperson, you're getting partly or you're partly paid on commission. You should be looking for every possible tool to help you drive more commission, drive more sales. So this is a benefit to you. So help communicate that, not so much the kind of ambiguity around, AI and a new tool in the tool belt, right? So again, I'd say bringing it back around, aligning philosophically, psychologically, making sure that people feel heard, making sure that people, understand that a new tool is not there to replace them or hurt their productivity, but rather to help it, is really key. And no matter how good the technology is, if you don't have that alignment with the end user and that comfort, you're never really going to get anything off the ground.
Yeah, and so Chase, what Jason's talking about reminds me of something that occurred to me recently, which is that I actually heard more talk about change management before AI became such a big thing than since AI has become such a big thing. It's almost like the change management discussion, which from my perspective is more important than ever, has kind of got lost in the wash. And are you seeing that in your clients? Or do they still have this focus on change management? How can you help them with that as they embrace your solutions to drive productivity?
Yeah, I love the question. I would say organizations are coming at the evolving world, which is certainly happening at unforeseen paces, coming at it really from different cultural backgrounds of project management methodologies and different systems. So they're having to evolve. I think what we see as really a critical factor um, is, yes, there's initial efficiency gain or risk reduction upon initial implementation, but the need to continuously improve is bigger than ever. I think things are moving fast, maybe faster than ever. Can't expect perfection out of the box, and you really need to have partners inside your business that are continuously improving and finding ways to enhance and enrich the solution. And I think for me, it's why it always ladders back to that use case, which can evolve and change over time, by the way, isn't static. But you have to know, as a business partner, know how your customers are operating, what problems they're having, where the big blocks are, and partnering together to chip away at those and improve those. So for me, it's big spike of efficiency gain at the beginning, and
Yeah.
then really steady improvement over time as the relationship continues to develop and mature.
Got it. Okay, good. And Varun, we have a question from the audience directed at you. There are a few parts to it. So the first one is, what are the main initiatives on AI implementation for Infor WMS? How are you coping with the fast-moving development of AI in the market? And how do you think you'll maintain competitiveness in the future in that kind of an environment? That's a tough question.
It's a tough question. Let me try to see if I can unpack, and I'll take a shot at it. I think I'll go from reverse. Or what are we doing to keep up with the market? Is we are an R&D team at core, which means we are trying to basically stay ahead of the market. My team is, if you look into my team, like the product management group that I manage, we are always looking at 1 to 2 year horizon. We are not basically living in the current state because we are trying to explore the possibilities. As an example, one of the cool things that one of my team members really worked is, can I use an agent to build a model of my choice? Right? I mean, it's such a powerful concept where you are basically democratizing the world of AI, if you will, where, like, say, a person with no knowledge about machine learning or data science can come and build and deploy machine learning models, right? I think this is one example as to what we kind of keep doing, like, say, to keep ourselves more relevant and stay ahead, right? And then on the WMS system, I would want to quote that, like, say, one of the use cases that we recently worked and we were able to turn it around within a span of just 4 weeks is this pick sequencing use case. So we had this one customer who wanted to basically understand what is the route that I need to take in my warehouse in order to pick the items and fulfill those orders. the improvement has been a dramatic. The relevant relative number, which is 10% improvement, is small, but to them it seemed a huge difference, right? Just so you know. The other thing that we are working as we are speaking now is the pallet optimization use case. Because you have a truck, there are various constraints. You have a freezer, or like say you're having a dry item, whatever item that you would want to ship, there are pallet size constraints. So you're basically you to kind of build an optimization model to kind of go with it. And the approach that we take is take incremental steps, right? Which means that we are not trying to build for the utopic this one right away, because the moment we do it, then it is going to be monolithic. You have to kind of throw it away. We build something small called as a minimum lovable product. We deploy it, we see customer feedback, we iterate it, and then we provide. We keep ourselves very close and relevant to the customer by having these smaller iterative cycles, if you will.
Got it. Okay, that's a good answer. So, and that leads me to my closing question. I think, unless somebody else from the crowd has one, but I think this is a good one, and I'm just going to surprise you guys with it, just so you know. So, where do you think, distributors? What do you think distributors are going to look like, say, 5 years from now and 10 years from now? I mean, if you think about, and I know it's impossible to predict, but let's try to get some insight into the audience into, with all the technology come from your firms and others. If you were to walk through a distributor 5 years from now or 10 years from now, what would be different than what they look like today in terms of automation and technology? So, who wants to start with that?
Well, they'll all be on distro, of course. Well, we hope. But no, I'll say that with respect to what distro is working on and will be working on, I think no matter what, the end state here is a more human-centric sales process.
Yeah.
That's what it has to be. And so whether that's achieved by automation with sales order entry, by automation around takeoffs or bill of materials quoting, or just by having kind of a wingman in the form of RepBot or a similar chat agent. I mean, I think everybody's going to have a chat agent of some point. It's of some variety at some point. The end state, I think, just needs to be consultative. As you start to think about the ways in which services are more and more commoditized, you're not going to differentiate on price, especially if you're somebody who's representing a smaller distributor, right? You're not going to be able to compete with the bigs on price. What you're competing on is value add, and if you're not a distributor that does actual sort of engineered solutions or material value add, the value add needs to be in the sale or consultative process. And so what that brings us to is if your people are able to not just punch in orders, but actually help guide the end customer to what they need, help configure a system, help provide an insight that they didn't already have, help provide recommendations for products or accessories so they don't have to make 2 trips, that sort of thing. That's really what we need to go for. And that's the end state, I think. And so there are a lot of different ways to get there. But I think, at the end of the day, if you could provide that consultative feeling, that feeling of expertise, that's going to be the differentiator. That's going to be your value add. And that's what's going to keep you in the game relative to other folks who aren't doing that.
Chase, what do you think? Walk through a distributor 5 years from now, 10 years from now. What's going to be different than today?
Yeah, I love it. The crystal ball of looking into the future. And as I think about this question, I think back to 5 or 10 years ago, and how different things are and how some things aren't, haven't changed. I think I actually think the pace of AI agents will be much faster. I think that's immersing, everywhere we turn. I think in 5 to 10 years, I think we'll see fewer people doing basic repetitive tasks. I think AI will kind of up level or eliminate some of those redundant tasks, which, I think those parts of our companies or our worlds, yeah, those are ripe for change and improvement. And so I think there'll be continuous improvements in automation, in robotics, in AI. And I think, what that looks like with the most progressive, most innovative company versus maybe a smaller company that's a follower are probably going to be very different. But I think what will for sure be true is all of our worlds are changing at a pace that we've never seen before. And I think we have to embrace those changes, pick and choose the things that make sense for us. Inside of our business, I can speak from my personal experience. We've invested in some things in the past that we weren't ready for, and you need to prioritize and reflect and benchmark. I think you know thought sessions like this are really helpful, but just to keep extending your networks, talking to people, learning, asking questions. Is there a better way to do this? What are the top 2 or 3 priorities I need to tackle this year, next year, et cetera? But yeah, the pace is going to continue to accelerate. I think AI is really, it's still in the early stages, but it's it's immersing all of our businesses, and I think I um, encourage everybody to find a way to embrace it now and not ignore it, because it's really is it can be a step change in terms of productivity.
Excellent. Varun, you had the most time to think about this. So what do you think
Yes.
5, 10 years from now? What are distributors going to look like that different than today?
I think first of all, the pace at which the technology is evolving, I think 5 to 10 years is a very long horizon. So
Yeah.
I'm going to keep it to maybe 1 to 2 years. I'll put
All
it
right,
that
that's fair.
way. Right.
Sure.
And I like the one of the theme that Chase mentioned, which is product market fit, right? I mean, you cannot invest anything too early because when there is going to be lack of adoption. One core theme that we are actually working on is what I call as a control tower, right? Where you're
Mm.
kind of able to build that ecosystem. And as Jason mentioned, with a human-centric approach, right? So imagine a world like, say, where you're having your own virtual assistant at work, which can take care of mundane activities, right? That virtual assistant will talk with Ian's virtual assistant, which will talk with Chase virtual assistant, and will talk with Jason's virtual assistant, right? They are constantly communicating so that Chase, Jason, Ian, and Varun are focusing on things that really matters most from a customer standpoint, right? I think that's an hybrid world. It's an inevitable world that we are kind of going to step in. And that is where most of our investment have been, at least of late.
Yeah, no, it's interesting, and that's good too. Jason, you were talking about sort of sales becoming more human, not less so. And I sometimes get this question, when is AI going to make salespeople unnecessary? And my answer to that is, as long as customers are human, your salespeople need to be too. And that sounds tongue in cheek, but I mean it, because there are non-human customers, right? You got bin replenishment and vending machines that reorder for themselves, and e-procurement systems that do some of that. But as long as the decision makers and the people who are responsible for and control of the purchasing process are human, I think you're going to need humans to call on them. And so I think sales reps are actually pretty insulated from AI for a while, in my opinion. So um, anyway, so okay, good. Those are some good answers. Thanks, guys. It's really been hold on. We got one more question. Let's see here. Okay. One more question here from Becca. Hi, Becca. What distributor stakeholders do you have the most success getting to use this? So this is your technology. Is it sales leaders? Is it marketing leaders? Is it finance people? So for your solutions, who do you find are, I guess, the most prone to wanting to embrace these new technologies? Is how I'd paraphrase Becca's question. Thank you, Becca.
I'll say from Distro's perspective, at the end of the day, we're seeking to have an impact on the bottom line. And so it's working backwards from that. And the folks who are going to be the most motivated to embark on a new technological journey are going to be the ones who can drive ROI through that. So for us, when we're thinking about, hey, in your organization, who'd be a great person to connect us to? That's going to be typically VP of sales,
Yeah.
or actually VP of marketing, depending on how the roles are split up. But anybody who is really focused on, hey, how can I drive more revenue in my part of the organization? It's an incentive thing, and we find that when you move further and further away from that, AI starts to feel more like a shiny toy. Like, it's going to have lots of really important impacts across the organization for sure. But we find that the most traction tends to be, hey, we can show something demonstrable where there's an impact to the bottom line, there's an ROI, and the people who are going to be, for distro, the most thoughtful about that are typically sales leaders.
Interesting. Okay. Varun, who's your biggest ally?
I think it depends upon the use case.
Okay.
Is how at least I see of it. So, for example, for this pick sequencing use case that I just mentioned, floor managers are the one, right? So we would want to make sure that we can actually talk and communicate with them closely to understand if they can leverage this optimization model, what are some of their pain points, and whether it will help them to drive better decisions or not. On the other hand, when you talk about pricing, it depends, right? Is it the executive department who's basically setting some targets,
Right.
or is it the pricing manager who's basically kind of driving it? And sometimes it's a reconciliation of both, right? So we will have to kind of engage accordingly, is how at least I see of it.
Chase, what about you? Who's your biggest ally when you're out there selling solutions?
Yeah, I think in the context of distributors, it's typically HSE and safety. I'd say we're really trying to get in front of the CIO CTO cohort, just in terms of digital transformation. That's where we see the most future value in terms of eliminating redundancy, unifying operations, and moving beyond the simple hardware that enables data collection.
Got it. Okay, good. All right. So that's it for questions. Let me wrap up here. So please hold on for just a second. We've got a couple more programs coming up. You're not going to want to miss this one on November. AI News and Gurus on November 4th. This is a regular podcast/webcast that we have hosted by our very own Brian Hopkins, who's a world-class expert on LLMs, and Brooks Hamilton, who runs AI Strategy Advisors. This is sponsored by Cognitus, and we have a guest from Cognitus, Jeff Van Pelt, who's the practice lead for consumer products and wholesale distribution. That's going to be a really interesting show. And then on November 5th, we've got a program called, it's another technology leader panel called Using State-of-the-Art Analytics to Understand Performance, brought to you by White Cup. We'll have Kristen Tom from White Cup and Brian Hopkins, who's our COO, talking about using analytics to understand your own performance. So, hey, gents, thanks so much for a great panel. I really enjoyed it. Really appreciate you joining us. And safe travels wherever you're going, Chase. And we'll see you guys on the next program. Thanks again.
Thank you so much, guys.
Thank you.